Don.
Thanks for joining the Ron and Don show today. Today our topic is career derailers. And what are you wearing?
Heck, I'm retired. I can go to the beach anytime I want. I fortunately outlived my usefulness, and you know how that works.
Goodness gracious. Don, would you go get yourself cleaned up?
One of the things that in my career has come up a number of times when operations sees you using the same contractor over and over again in a market or across markets. And to a certain extent, it may be justified, but they recognize it and they think that you are then too dependent on that particular contractor. And it can come up in meetings. There's been several meetings I've been involved with where we talked about the percentage of the work done by the facilities department by specific contractors. And so many percent was this one, so much percent was this one, and on down the line until you get down to insignificant and they don't even look at that anymore. And it was, why are we using them so much? Are we really getting good competitive bids? Why, huh? And you're sitting there trying to justify what you're doing and why you're doing it.
And from the contractor's perspective, I'll say too that if you are a contractor and you find you're not getting as much work as you had hoped from a client, you may want to ask yourself, do you really want to be the one they're talking about in the hallways of corporate?
Now, to go on the other side of this, for the last few years of my career, I was way overstretched. And to a certain extent, I had a little cachet in the organization. And they didn't talk so much about my using of my go-to contractors as much, because I could not be there to teach new contractors what they needed to do, and I needed to have people I could rely on completely for these very tough and specific jobs. We got into some pretty tough work. Ron was one of my go-to contractors, and I had several more around the country that I could call and we could get things done. And I could move on to the next project or the next thing and keep all the balls in the air. So I could justify it by the workload and by my credibility. But if you're just getting started or you've just switched jobs, you don't have either of those two opportunities. And you'll have to develop a little better go-to list and spread out the work a little bit.
Okay, Don, career derailers. What else?
Communication. You have to be precise, concise, and extremely detailed to the point of the receiver's need to know or want to know.
Now you're talking about receivers. I would imagine first and foremost the operations team.
Now the restaurant operations team are going to want the most information. They're going to want to know when, what's it going to do to my restaurant, how do I have to prepare, all the details of how it's going to affect their business and their lives. That needs to be constantly updated, and it has to be in their particular window. You may send out an email with all this, but if it is a millennial, you need to send out a text saying, hey, the email's got all the details on it, you might want to look at it.
How about with contractors and vendors?
Contractors and vendors, you're going to have a lot of communications going back and forth about here's the window of opportunity, here's what time operations will get out, here's what's going to happen, we're shipping this equipment to a certain location, here's what it is, do you have the right installing contractors, do you have your subs lined out, do you have all the certificates of insurance, all those little details, do we have the permits coming? You're asking all kinds of questions, and you have to have all that information to make sure that we're moving forward at a proper speed.
Who else?
In my organizations, we're oftentimes having to buy equipment or furniture or other items that are going to go with that particular job. It may even be things that come from small orders. We may be changing the plates out because we're doing a remodel, and the plates is going to be part of the whole re-imaging and branding. You may have signage, you may have all kinds of other things that are involved. So you have to work with other vendors other than your general contractor and your prime subs.
Wow, that's quite a bit of information. I can now understand why you're so insistent on getting daily tie downs, photos, and updates from your general contractor.
There's one other situation that we have to review here. You're gonna give good information to operations on a timely basis, as quickly as you know what's going on, so that they feel as though they're in the loop. But you also need to give what has been commonly referred back to as a 40,000 foot level review of what is happening to their bosses, maybe their bosses' bosses, the directors of operations, the senior or the vice president of operations, to your boss saying, hey, we've got this under control, it's gonna be such and such a date. Operations are fully on board, they've confirmed that they agree with it, the contractor's all set up, the permits we'll have in hand, we're moving forward. And you just leave it with just the bullet points, not all the details.
Career derailers, what else?
Sense of urgency. If the restaurant thinks that you aren't paying attention to what they think is critical, it doesn't matter what you do. You're not going to be on their good list. So you need to get in with them and understand their priorities, maybe even with their bosses, and say, what is more important? I've got all these things that have to be happening right after the new fiscal year and the new budget comes out, and I can't do it all. We don't have enough contractors that are skilled enough to do all these jobs that I can't be at while they're happening. Or we don't have, we can't purchase the items that need to come in to do these jobs until after the contracts and purchase orders are issued, so that can't happen for a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later. You might need to bring operations into setting the priorities, and then you have your sense of urgency on each particular project, and you communicate it back. We're still on track with operations on a regular basis, saying we're still on track, or if something blows up, then you can be on top of it.
Well, I'm certainly paying attention to that, because that sense of urgency I expect extends to the contractors as well. So it makes complete sense. What else?
Well, when something goes wrong, I don't care whose fault it is, you own it, 100%. If you immediately find out something hasn't gone right, you put your corrective action in place instantly, and then you communicate back to everybody and take ownership. This happened, whether it was your decision, somebody else's decision, somebody did something stupid in the restaurant, doesn't much matter. Own it, say, I'm taking responsibility for it, here's what happened, here's where we're moving forward, and here's exactly what's gonna happen as a result of that, when it's gonna happen, how it's gonna happen, and what are the ongoing consequences that are gonna be befalling whomever messed up, including yourself. If you do that, you take all of the problems of somebody getting upset, bringing communication in through the back door to your boss or to whomever. You admit to operations, their boss, higher boss, your boss, and they're all in the loop before they can get a communication saying, hey, this job is all messed up. You've already communicated back how it's going to get back on track and what it's going to be like going forward. You've deflated that balloon of anger and frustration and why he told me I was going to, you've taken all that away from them, and you're back to being responsible for the job, and you've kept it at a very calm level, which is critical for moving forward.
Career derailers. Don has identified 4 different categories for ensuring that you stay on track with your career. Those are, number 1, dependency. Don't be too dependent on any one contractor, vendor, or supplier. Number 2, communication. He talked about all the constituents in communication and making sure that communication is complete and in a full circle. The sense of urgency and prioritization. And 4, honesty. Well, Don, I think we've got it there.
If you own it, you got to be able to communicate it and take it into your hands and make it work. And if it doesn't work, you got to own that part of it and get it corrected and keep it on schedule.
Own it. I'm Ron.
I'm Don.
Thanks for being with us today. Please subscribe.